Hey, Robert, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Thank you for having me on. I'm happy to join the pantheon of fantastic people that you speak to on a weekly basis.
Well, yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And do you want to, this is the first time you've been on my channel. Do you want to say a little bit about you and what you do and where people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I am the Contrarian Capitalist. The best place you can find me is contrariancapitalist.substack.com. I'm sure if you just type it into Google, it will come up. And the channel is all about protecting your wealth, defending your freedom, and outsmarting the system. And that's gold, silver, commodities, plan Bs, plan Cs if you really want. And I've been in Mexico most of the year. My wife is Mexican, so that's the reason for making the move out of sunny old England and being this part of the world.
Yes, sunny old England, right? Okay, and I know this is going to go out in your channel, so if people don't know me, then Crypto Rich been covering crypto since April 2017. But then come Brexit, life got a lot more interesting. So I started doing more and more politics. And I voted Brexit and I still stand for Brexit. And I do a mixture of politics and crypto and some gold and silver because that's money. And you can
Mhm.
find me on X Crypto Rich YT and also Odyssey, YouTube, BitChute. Although if you're in the UK, you have to use a VPN to get to BitChute because the government wants to protect us from BitChute. Also Rumble, Three Speak, and Podbean. Oh,
Perfect. I'll make sure that message gets out. I would highly recommend some of the conversations I've listened to that you've had. I'd highly recommend for anyone that doesn't know who you are on your channel, please do go and check yourself out. It's quality interviewing, quality listening, really good content.
thank you, thank you. Now just before we started recording, you said, by the way, we're recording this on Friday, the 7th of November. It is 22:36 as I speak, UK time. So people, when this goes out, people can time it. Okay, that's when it went, and then that happened later, so we couldn't comment on that. But but a few days ago, Zoran Mamdani was elected New York City mayor. And just before we started recording, you said that he's something along the lines of he's going to destroy New York or something. How
Yeah,
come? Why do you say that?
I think that I'll try and be as unbiased as I can
Oh
politically.
no,
I
hold on,
think
Robert.
that
Hold
if
on, Robert. There's no such thing as unbiased. I have a bias. You have a bias. You no. Let me just check something. You're a man, right?
100%.
100. Yeah, already biased because you think like a man, right? And then you come from a particular cultural background, biased. You have a particular political perspective, biased. I'm biased. Nothing wrong with bias, just tell the truth about it rather than I'm not neutral, I'm anti-war.
Fair enough. No, I appreciate that. I think that's my a little bit of Britishness coming out. First time we've obviously spoken and just trying to be a little bit, dare I say, polite. Okay, fine, fair enough. I'll
Listen,
take my
I
gloves
have
off
Tom
then.
Luongo on my channel.
No, no, very true. Okay, I'll take my gloves off. I think the challenge that we have with any left-leaning politics or extreme left-leaning politics is that it's like a utopia. So ideally, what people want to work in their heads, there's going to be a way to, you've got to fund these things. For example, if we look at some of the things he said, free bus passes, supermarkets, that sort of stuff. I just have a feeling from what I've read, and I must admit, I've not sort of deep dived into everything, so I'll keep my answer nice and brief. That it sounds like it's to paraphrase an AC/DC song, on the highway to hell. It really does. You see a lot of people on X who seem to be on both sides of the political divide saying, if I was in New York, I'd be getting out. Yeah, I'm just going to say watch this space on it. But I do think my gut instinct is I think New York City is going to go down the toilet. And I'm a New York Jets fan. I'm an NFL fan, and that team sucks as well. So it's not been a good week if for anyone related to New York. But yeah, I'd be careful what you wish for, I think is how I'd summarize that.
Okay. Well, let me give you my take on it, right? And I was asked by my cousins, what do I think about Zora Mamdani? And I hadn't really looked at it. considered it. But I did just a little bit of digging, and then um, something's come to light that kind of like leave me concerned. So I the whole notion of pattern recognition,
Mhm.
right? And for people who don't know, pattern recognition is what our brains do in order to ensure our survival. Is pattern recognition, so that when I see a tree, I can recognize the pattern of a tree, so that the next time I see a tree, I don't have to go through the whole process of discovery. I see the patterns. And it's the same deal with a tiger, right? I don't want to keep discovering what is this stripy big thing coming towards me each time, right? I'm going to be able to recognize, no, that's a threat, or whatever it is. And then for me, I mentioned I work as a child protection social worker. So there's patterns that I see in people's behavior that indicate, okay, this is someone who's a perpetrator of domestic abuse, or this kid has been traumatized in a particular way. I see patterns. And perhaps people who do technical trading, they do pattern recognition in terms of, this is a cup and handle, or this is a descending wedge and an ascending wedge. So we just do pattern recognition. My mum, fabulous cook, fabulous curries, unbelievable. She did pattern recognition. She said to me, put this much chili powder in. So how much? Oh, just this much. Like half a teaspoon, a teaspoon? No, just this much. Right? So, and I'm sure, whatever you're particularly skilled at, there's pattern recognition at play. So here's this guy, comes out of nowhere from a former colony of the United Kingdom, very articulate, good speaker, presentable, makes lots and lots of promises, gets lots of mainstream media coverage, sweeps the board. Everybody's behind him, very popular. Barack Obama, Zohran Mamdani. And in the UK, new kid on the block, Zach Polanski, the new leader of the Green Party, come out of nowhere. All of a sudden, I've been following him on X for a while, but all of a sudden, he's all over X. He's all over the mainstream media. So the mainstream media are pushing someone. They wouldn't push someone who was anti-establishment, not authentically anti-establishment. They don't have George Galloway on the mainstream media in the UK. They don't have David Curtin on the mainstream media in the UK. Might occasionally, very rarely, have Jeremy Corbyn. And then I'm Muslim, and my cousins are saying to me, well, what do you think about Zohran Mamdani? Because he's really against what was the genocide in Gaza. Right? We got to stop that. We got to stop that. We got to stop that. And I'm a bit like, okay, fair enough. He's running for a local office. Okay, if he wants to talk about a foreign issue, fine. He can do that. And he's speaking out against this particular conflict. Fine. But what about the one in Ukraine and Russia? A few months ago, there was a release of Ukrainian official information that Ukraine has lost 1.8 million people killed. 1.8 million people killed. I have no idea how many thousands of Russians have been killed. So he speaks out against the slaughter in Gaza, but not the slaughter of Slavs. Aren't Slavic lives important too? Don't they matter? And then he touts his Muslim credentials. Okay, fair enough. Got no issue being a Muslim myself. I don't care. But don't Muslims care about the deaths of all people? Shouldn't we care about the deaths of all people? Or is it like only Muslims' lives matter? I will only speak out when it's my people? Well, that's sectarianism. And then as a Muslim, how do we expect the population, the ummah of Muslims to grow if we're only going to speak up for our own and not speak up for the suffering of non-Muslims? That's not Islam. So why isn't he speaking out about that foreign conflict, which is a major conflict and is also has a risk of nuclear war? Because the European Union and the UK just want to keep provoking Russia. They want Russian resources. He don't want to go to war with the nuclear power in the world, the supreme nuclear power with more nuclear power, nuclear weapons than any other nation. Why not that one? Aren't there New York City citizens that are Ukrainian or Russian or have ties to those countries? Ah, the Democrats. He's a member of the Democratic Party. They support the war against Russia. The globalists want the war against Russia, and he's not broken ranks from that. So then he's tied to the Dems, and he promotes the trans agenda, which I don't think is particularly Islamic, never mind particularly human. I think it's anti-human, and he buys into the climate change agenda. That's also, I consider that to be anti-human based on completely flawed science that carbon dioxide has more of an impact on the planet's climate than the sun, really. And then in terms of his policies, like free, was it low government shops, government food shops?
Yeah.
That'll destroy small businesses, completely destroy small businesses. And how's it going to be funded? And what's he doing he wants to raise the minimum wage, fair enough, but what's he doing to generate a productive economy? I didn't see anything in any of on his website about supporting the generation of wealth in New York City. So if he does get away with his policies, then I think he will impoverish New York City. If JP Morgan in particular and Wall Street let him get away with it. JP Morgan have just built this fabulous new building, spent $3 billion in New York. They're not going to want to move. So you're going to destroy this city. And then driving up taxes, well, you're going to drive wealth away. You're going to discourage investment, especially in where people can move to places like Florida where there's no income tax and where the government's talking about getting rid of property tax as well. Then what? And then you're just left with an increasingly poor, dependent population.
Yeah, you've articulated that much better than I think I could have done, to be honest. So, but we're thinking along the same pages, and I think that, as you said, we've seen this before, and I've seen a couple of funny memes, photos on Facebook, on X, I should say. One was of Alex Soros and Mamdani, and I thought that was quite telling.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. He funded by the Soros Foundation. Now, the Soros Foundation doesn't necessarily fund directly, does it at arm's length through different NGOs and stuff, and do it through several NGOs as a way of disguising the source of the funds. That it looks like, they set up all these proxy NGOs, like, in the UK, Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, also the Antifa movements, BLM, all of that Soros funded, but it doesn't look like it's Soros funded because people just look at the front and say, okay, this is BLM, a different organization. Oh, this is Family Matters, a different organization. And they're all Soros funded. And he's a globalist.
Obviously. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing when you start putting these dots together, isn't it?
Yeah.
I should say the other funny photo or meme that I saw was a photo of Mamdani, and it just said Florida's Realtor of the Year. Obviously, saying that everyone's going to vamos to Florida. I thought that was quite funny, personally.
Yep. And just a few other things I just remembered is that I looked through his X feed. He promoted the injections. He wanted people to have the injections. And I think he's likely to, and I think also masking up. People should mask up because oxygen is bad for us. We need to have something over our mouth and breathing in the fungi and the bacteria that breed on the inside of those masks. That's much better for our health. So,
of course,
no, he's fairly mainstream Democratic platform. And unlike politicians that I think have integrity like Galloway, I don't agree with Galloway in everything. And he did have the injections, and I think he's made a few mistakes, but he calls out all wars. He's not partisan or sectarian. And the same deal with Corbyn and the same deal with David Curtin, who's on the right in the UK. They call out all wars because we're all human beings. And I think the other thing that Mamdani does is it further stokes division and sectarianism.
Spot on, yeah.
So that's my take on him.
Yeah. As I said earlier, I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet. We've seen this pattern happen before, so chances are we're gonna see the same thing happening again. And history doesn't always repeat, but it certainly rhymes. I think that's Mark Twain or something like that said that. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think you've articulated it better than I could have done. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And then the exit tax, that which goes on to the exit tax, because you'll have people leaving New York City, and New York can't impose an exit tax on them. The UK is talking about it because they want to keep strip mining the British citizenry of all their of any remaining wealth or whatever, so that we all own nothing. And apparently that's going to make us happy. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, where do we start? No one, it's a terrible idea. You need to. There's a lot wrong with the UK at the moment, but before we go into all the doom and gloom and negativity, I should say that if we're looking at the positives, and there has to be some positives, I think, is that it's holding up just about, but our legal system, now it's not perfect. I'm not going to say the UK legal system is perfect, but it's over 1,000 years, common law, Alfred the Great, and so forth. So I think that's over a long period of time that has held up. As I said, it's not perfect, but it held up quite well. So I just want to put that positive in there. Where do we start? Okay,
Before the exit
let's
tax,
roll back.
let me say something
Yeah.
about that, because people may not know.
Mm.
But England has a Bill of Rights, 1688 Bill of Rights,
Yes.
which is not an act of Parliament because it's set up or gave Parliament its powers. And some of the provisions in the Bill of Rights are that Parliament are the representatives of the people. They cannot pass any laws that are to the detriment of the people, and that these rights are in perpetuity. And in some time in the early 70s, lawyers, they stopped teaching the Bill of Rights and the English Constitution in law school. So then people grow up, judges and lawyers now, they don't know about the Bill of Rights. They don't know about the Coronation Act. They don't know about the Act of Settlement. They don't know about the Act of Union and how these have shaped the English Constitution, or about common law. And what's so great about common law is the principle that we are all equal under the eyes of law. We're all equal before the law. And there's
Yes.
a particular structure to the English Constitution, which involves the House of Lords, the House of Commons, the monarch, and the people. And the people are sovereign, and the monarch's job is to ensure that Parliament, the two houses, don't pass legislation that's to the detriment of the people. And unfortunately, monarchs have been rather remiss in that role.
I think remiss is a very good word. To be fair, I would urge people, by the way, if you have, if you're not sure about any of those laws and statutes that you've just said, go and read them. I can't claim that I've read every single one of them, but that English Bill of Rights is. I know Ian Burlingame has been on your show before, and mine. He talks about that a lot. Go back to your exit tax. Yeah. So last time I checked in, it was an idea of a settling up figure banded around 20%. What I should say is that in before Labour came to power last year, we've had X amount of years of Conservatives or Tory
14
rule,
years.
14 years. So they have been far from perfect, and we were in this position last year where I think anyone could see what was going to happen in that general election. We've had enough of the Tory party, so therefore we're not going to vote them in. Let's have a look at the alternatives. Okay, well, Reform not really doing too much a year ago. Lib Dems, I just Ed Davey is Ed Davey. I don't think you can ever take him seriously with him in charge personally. Greens, yeah, not a lot going on there. So you're left with really one choice. Well, don't vote, number one, but you're left with the alternative, Labour. So I think most people in the UK would have said last year, right, we're going to have a Labour majority. It's going to happen. There's no two ways about that. Could they possibly be any worse? And I think they've just said, hold my beer for the last
Yeah.
14 months, to be perfectly honest. That's my layman's terms take on it.
Yeah. Well, when Rishi Sunak became prime minister, one of the things I said several times on my channel is that he's going to do such an awful job. He's going to hand Starmer a massive, unassailable majority, and Starmer's going to do serious damage to Britain. And that's what happened. That is exactly what happened. I mean, during the campaign, Rishi Sunak said, "Oh, if we're elected, we're going to bring in conscription." What? What are you insane? That's a winning idea, really? No, that's an idea to put people off
Mhm.
because you got the war going on between Ukraine and Russia, right? And people are going to vote for a party that's going to bring in conscription. No, I think that was deliberate in order to drive more people into Starmer's arms. And also at the same time, you had Keir Starmer being lauded in the mainstream media. Because
Yeah.
he wasn't like that crazy lefty Jeremy Corbyn. He's a safe pair of hands, the adult in the room, reliable, dull as dishwater. They didn't say that, but they should have done. He just completely paraded and stuff. And this is the one, this is the leader that Britain needs and stuff. And then what he did, what Starmer did as a deliberate strategy, because I was reading something about one of his strategies. I forget his name who said this. They polled Labour voters and said they were going to do everything that Labour voters wanted them to do. And then, of course, as soon as they're in power, oh no, forget all that. We just said that to get into power.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so then it pretty much broke in every single electoral promise and passing legislation that wasn't in their manifesto. And even if it was, it's to the detriment of the people, like the assisted murder bill, which sickens me. And for people who don't know, it's called the assisted dying bill. And the government are proposing that people can choose to be euthanized. And it was supposed to be the people with long-term sickness and the elderly. And all that's happened as it's going through Parliament and being debated and debated and debated. It's like the thin end of the wedge, where we had Lord Falconer, mate of Tony Blair, saying, "Oh well, if somebody's got Down syndrome or autism or is disabled, then they should have the option of assisted suicide." Oh, okay, yeah, you and I, Robert, we want to live in a country where the disabled are just killed off. Do we? Where did they do that before? Yes.
History repeats and rhymes, doesn't it? We said it earlier on. It's very dangerous. But we'll go back to pattern recognition because you said it at the start of our conversation that we can see these patterns, whether it's in New York City, for example, or in the UK, or again going around the world. I don't claim to know much about Australian politics or what's going on down there, but I've got a few Australian friends who have recently moved out of Australia. They've moved to various parts of Latin America because they've been citing, well, we've got issues with energy or a bad political environment, or we don't agree with this policy, or all sorts of things. So I'm not going to lay claim to everything about Australian politics, but they're moving and leaving. We're going to see it happening more in the UK because, like you said, London London's always been a very interesting place, and all I can say on it is probably there's a lot of shady things that go on. I'm sure your other guests have dived into that. But is it a financial hub of the world? Well, it's one of the most recognizable places in the world. There's a lot that goes on there within the city of London itself. But it seems as though that the current people in government have tried everything they can just to piss the people off. I didn't know if I could swear, but I just done it anyway.
Sure.
That it's they've seems like they've done everything in their power just to pee everyone off. that, oh, you don't want digital ID? Oh, we're going to bring it in. You want low electric bills? Not a problem, but we're going to stop, drilling for oil and that natural gas field in Lincolnshire. Now, don't worry about that. We'll, wind, solar, etc. And people, I think what I'm seeing and what I understand when I speak to people back at home is that more and more people are starting to put two and two together and they're making four. And, sometimes we've just got to, do it in layman's terms, be nice when we speak to people. But I think more and more people are waking up and smelling the coffee and going, yeah, this isn't right. And they're starting to connect all these dots. And I think that's a promising sign, personally.
Now, are they connecting all these dots to the Great Reset and Agenda 2030?
Good question. Unlikely they've got that far yet. And I don't want to speak for everyone that's listening to this because everyone works at their own pace. But yes, that's what ultimately people should be looking at. I totally agree with you. But I think, yeah, sometimes you just got to take it one day at a time, one step at a time, and people will hopefully get there in the end. And, it might seem like we're sat here with our tinfoil hats, but I'm sure you and I were both thinking similar things back in 2020 when all this started. And we both said, something's not right here. And then we started digging, and here we are today.
Yeah, yeah. And for people who don't know, if you don't know yet, the Great Reset Agenda 2020, you will own nothing and be happy. They want us living in low traffic networks where we're limited to 15 miles. We can't travel more than 15 miles from our home. Digital ID with a biometric digital ID attached to with a wallet with a central bank digital currency which they control, so they can track all our purchases, and they can stop us from spending money on certain things, and they can take money out of our wallets. And then part of that is creating alternative structures for governance that are undemocratic, where more like mini little EU sort of structures where you can't actually vote in or vote out the lawmakers, creating those sorts of structures, having us dependent upon a centralized energy source, which is the whole thing about the climate change agenda, because then they control that. And doing away with the infrastructure that's been built for hydrocarbon energy, which is incredibly efficient and keeps us warm, and which Britain has lots and lots and many, many years of supply still that we could access. And then promoting the trans agenda so that we lose any sense of ourselves and become so messed up that we don't know whether we're men and women, and are therefore able to easily ruled, and we don't pose a threat because we're so messed up in our heads and we can't unite with others. And then having open borders, bringing in all these people legally and illegally competing for jobs and housing and resources in the UK, and then reducing wage costs for the corporations, but at the same time making everybody poorer and creating conflict between the local population and the new arrivals as they struggle for the same amount of resources that aren't expanding, therefore justifying greater authoritarian measures from the government in order to keep everything in check, basically destroying everything, all the old structures as part of a much larger Cloward Piven strategy. Cloward Piven, two lecturers, sociology lecturers, left-wing lecturers from the United States, who said what you got to do to go from a mixed economy, a capitalist type Western economy, to state capitalism is you have to destroy everything and then have the government come in as the solution, and then they can bring in centralized control to save us all. And that will also include UBI. That conversation will come at some point. And in the background, the whole reason this is happening, because of the fraud that is fiat currency.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Well,
I'm
obvious
glad
to you
we
and
got
I,
to that point.
obvious to you and I, but not obvious to most people, because most people don't understand how money works or how currency works, because we're not taught it in school. One thing I don't know if you do know, but my 18-year-old and 21-year-old never went to school. They were home educated. And my 21-year-old bought a little bit of Bitcoin 10 years ago.
Probably doing very well for himself, I imagine,
Well,
then 10 years later.
silly monkey, when he was 18, he asked me for it. And I said, look, it's in my hardware wallet. I'll hold on to it. No, Abu, I'm 18. I can have it now. Okay. And then his wallet got hacked.
Ah,
Yeah. Anyway, good
no,
lesson to
life,
have when you're 18.
yeah, life lessons there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, where do we go with all of that? I I'm happy to always have these types of conversations. I should point out, being the other side of the microphone for once is it's always different. So it's always a good feeling to have being the other side of the mic. But I like the fact that we're thinking on the same level here. I agree 100% with everything you said. I
No, you
cannot
don't.
find any.
No,
Oh no,
let's
no,
have an
everything.
argument.
Well, I'm sure over the course of this conversation we might have something that we disagree on. But everything you've just said there about what the end game is, why the end game is what it is, what people need to do, create a problem, create a solution. I can't disagree with all of that because I think the same. So that's that. And okay, well let's tie this into the financial system. I know people have got differing views on the US level of debt and what's going to happen there. But let's keep in the UK for now. 2.7, 2.8 trillion. Um, all you have to do is look at the history of fiat currencies. All of them go to zero. That's fact. That happens, and it's probably going to happen again. The odds are pretty favourable,
I think
to say the
over
least.
3,600 fiat currencies have gone to zero. Gold never has.
Gold is Gold is true money. Gold is God's money, as Robert Kiyosaki would say. I believe it's the same for silver as well, personally. I know there's industrial uses, etc., etc. But for me, I believe silver is also God's money. But you are right. It's the fiat currency system that is leading us down this path yet again. And because we just don't want to learn of stuff that's happened before.
But that's to do with human nature. Now, I
Mhm.
think gold is money. I think silver is money. I think Bitcoin is money. But ultimately gold, because everything's ultimately is measured against gold, is the ultimate benchmark for value. But supposing I said to you, listen, Robert, I've worked something out. I can twig the Bitcoin code just a little bit, and I can produce a few extra Bitcoins every now and nobody knows. My wife wants a new kitchen, right? You want a new
Mhm.
car. Okay, just a little bit. Just don't tell anyone. Here you go, mate. Here's a little bit of Bitcoin for you, a little bit for me. I mean, who can resist that temptation?
True.
Now, the thing about Bitcoin can't be done with Bitcoin because the code is open source, and those dishonorable transactions wouldn't get consensus. They'd be thrown out, right? So we can't do that with Bitcoin. But you can with fiat currency because of the Cantillon effect, which is those that are closest to the spigot. And actually, that applies to money as well, because those that are closest to the spigot, to the source, have the greatest benefit. So then when the
Mhm.
source is, I can just, press a few buttons and then create hundreds of millions of pounds. Well, of course, I'm going to use that currency to preserve my position, to favor those that are my partners and compatriots and family members, and preserve their position, and then reward those that will help preserve our positions. So then eventually you get buying influence.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It's nothing we haven't seen before, nothing that we won't ever see again. And that's just how the world works now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the UK debt is about 2.8 trillion, you said?
Yeah, last time I checked it, between 2.7, 2.8 off the top of my head.
Right. And that's not including the interest payments on that.
Not to my knowledge, no. I'd have to
No,
relook at that over
no,
the
it doesn't
weekend for
include the
accurate
interest
figures.
payments because they would just go up and up and up and up. What is the interest? How much interest? You take out a mortgage for $2.8 trillion. How much is the monthly interest rate?
I'm
How
sure
much?
the Rothschilds wouldn't have a problem with that if you went to them. I'm sure it'll be
That's right.
fine.
That's right. How much do I have to earn? So then I've got this house, right? And the mortgage is
Mhm.
$2.8 trillion. So I can't really generate that sort of money. Well, perhaps I could if I dug the well, if I dug in the went to the back garden and I dug the well and I tapped into the oil that's available
Mhm.
there, right? Of course, I'd have to invest in order to be able to do that. But then I'm extracting money out of the ground in the form of oil, in the way that Qatar does. But I'm not going to do that for some crazy reason. Instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the lodgers in my house and keep extracting more and more money from them. But then they're going to have less and less to invest, and they're going to have less and less for their basic goods and essentials. And eventually the whole thing will crumble because I can't extract $2.8 trillion or the interest on $2.8 trillion month after month after month after month as I keep on
Mhm.
impoverishing my poor lodgers. And if they try and, revolt or whatever, well, or if they put out a meme, a far right meme, well, I'll just use some of the money,
Yeah.
some of the currency that I'm able to print to buy the police, the security services to lock them up for 3 years. There you go.
Yeah.
Welcome to the UK.
Yeah, you beat me to it. Welcome to the UK 2025. Yeah, it's chaos. And I think the thing is that we I've always said this about energy policy in general. I've always said the same thing that if you go out and ask people, would you like a greener and cleaner environment and world in which to live? I'm pretty sure most people are going to say yes, that that's what they would like. Not a problem. I agree. I'd like that as well. Then the question becomes, well, how do you get there? Because I think there's two paths here. You either take that proverbial step back to take two steps forward. So you have a look at China's emissions and the amount of coal plants that are being opened, et cetera, and people will criticize that. But then also look at China and look at the amount of nuclear plants that they've opened, and it all, and the amount of work they've done. I think in with their grid as well. No, I won't even get started on Chinese transport because it looks amazing. But going back to the grid, so yes, you can look at coal and you can go, well, they're just polluting and they're bad and they're doing this and they're importing this oil, blah, 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 blah. You then look at what they're doing with regards to nuclear technology, and arguably they're one of the most advanced countries in the world in terms of how many reactors, etc., that they have. Well, that is the ultimate green source of power at the moment, and it will likely be for quite a long time. I know there's geothermal and there's thorium, but these things are decades away. So their approach is, well, we're just going to do that. And in the long run, 20, 30, 40 years, it's going to quite probably benefit their country, benefit their system. Whereas through things that you mentioned earlier on with, you learn nothing and be happy and net zero, yada, 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 everyone, not everyone, I should say, but let's keep it with the UK. Germany's an even bigger basket case, to be fair. You look at the UK and you go, right, okay, well, net zero, and there's too many emissions, there's too many cows farting, we're eating too much meat, and we're doing all this and doing all that. And then all of a sudden your electric bill comes through and it's up, I don't know, 120% in a year or whatever the number is. And people go, well, hang on a minute. I've got old Ed Miliband, who Bloomberg says is the most dangerous man in Britain, and I tend to agree with him on that, saying that, oh, we'll cut your energy bills, etc., that's fine. Oh, but we've got access to all these natural resources in the North Sea. We've got this big gas field in, I think it's North Lincolnshire, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, you're right. We should invest in that. If you invest in that and you've got the refinery capacity, or you can, make some deals, do a bit of business, so to speak, because London's pretty good at doing all sorts of business, then number one, what you're going to do is over the long run, you're going to have an energy abundance, which is great because you can either keep the reserves or sell off the reserves. Fine, do whatever you want to do with them. If you've got energy abundance and you're going down that route, then, well, funnily enough, because you've got that, you've got more supply than demand, so to speak. Well, economics 101, that price comes down. And if that price comes down, I imagine everyone that gets an electric bill or a gas bill, or if you've got an oil boiler or whatever it is, they're going to look at those bills coming through and go, oh, well, I don't know, my bills have gone down 50%. This is great. Thank you very much. Because with that abundance of energy, you could do some deals, sell it off, do whatever. But because of things that you've mentioned already in this conversation, we're down the wrong side of that path. Yes, we all want greener and, a greener world. I think we'd all agree on that. But we've taken the dangerous path, I would say, not the abundance path. You need to get that energy abundance in first. Benefit your local people first, benefit the citizens of the UK, benefit them first with lower bills. Um, I don't have the number to hand, but you then look at the North oil fields and you then look at how much government's paying Norway for oil per year. I think it's in the billions, if I'm not mistaken. It's like, well, hang on a minute, we could just go and get that ourselves
Yep.
and deal with that ourselves, but we don't want to.
Yeah, no, we don't want to, because what the government wants to do is to deprive us of access to energy. But it's impossible to run a modern economy without cheap, abundant energy. And
Yeah.
you talk about going greener and everything, but there's nothing green about wind power. There's nothing green about solar power, because I've looked into their the pollution that they cause. You know, the the amount of silver that you need in a wind power or a solar in a wind turbine or solar panel. There isn't enough affordable silver in the world for there to be solar panels for everybody in the UK. Then you need backup gas turbines,
Yeah.
because when there isn't enough wind and it's nighttime, you need to be able to generate energy anyway. And then you need a lot of diesel to lubricate the wind turbines, and then setting them, disposing of them, they're toxic. You can't recycle them. They end up in landfill. There's nothing green about them, nothing efficient about them, and we'd be better off, much richer. Let me just look at Qatar, digging gas and oil out of the ground, and coal. We have so much coal. And then the other thing about the hydrocarbons is fertilizer. We need
Hmm.
fertilizer. Well, you make it from gas and all the other useful things that are made from oil. The single biggest industrial commodity of all is oil. All our plastics. We're not going to get plastics from wind turbines.
No, it's true. It's a very good point, well made. And again, it goes back to we're taking the wrong path. And I think that I keep wondering that with people in charge, are you either just incredibly misguided, which is possible, or are you that stupid, which is also possible? I haven't come to a
I
conclusion
think
on
they're
that
that
yet.
controlled.
Yeah, fair enough.
They're that controlled. Plus, also, and I said this on one of my videos. It's to do with, I think it's to do with the fraud of fiat currency. A few years ago, I had the privilege, and it was because he's a hero of mine, of interviewing George Galloway. This is before he got mega big. And I asked him, I said, where are the political titans of yesterday? I wasn't a fan of Margaret Thatcher, but she had acumen. She was able to address an audience. She stood for something. Same with Peter Shaw and Barbara Castle and Arthur Scargill and George Galloway. And what he said to me, he said they all grew up politically as campaigners. Galloway learned the art, his oratory, on part of trade union campaigns and everything. He says that
Mhm.
doesn't happen anymore. Now you have politics as a university degree course and media studies. So then you get people going from school to study politics. Then the centralized structures in the Tory party and the Labour Party just blow in these graduates who don't have any life experience as MPs, and then they become MPs. And then also they're willing to be bribed, because there's no way that they're going to rise because of their own talent. Starmer up against Galloway? Really? I mean, right? Starmer would just die. Who's going to vote for Starmer? He has no charisma, no ideas of his own,
Mhm.
completely dead. He doesn't even have any of the inauthentic charm of Tony Blair, who could at least carry an audience. Starmer can't, but that's only Starmer's chance of power and leadership, is if somebody paves the way through corruption. And the same deal for Rachel from accounts. We've got our
Right.
the budget coming
Geez,
up
yeah.
end of November. You think she's going to be chancellor on the basis of her own talents?
Well, I mean, first of all, be careful what you say there, Rich, because you might get put in jail. I'm just saying, we know that just be careful. I'm just saying, if it's the last conversation we ever have, it's been nice having a chat with you. If you get locked away for saying naughty things about the PM. Rachel from accounts, well, she shouldn't be there in the first place. Last time I checked in, the previous deputy prime minister had, shall we say, a tax issue with a secondary home, and she got ousted. And all of a sudden, our Chancellor of the Exchequer, who apparently was advised a couple of times to get a license for the house that you need to rent out in Southwark in southeast London, didn't do so. Yeah, slap on the wrist and you crack on doing your job. We've turned a 22 billion pound black hole into between 40 and 50 billion, depends on who you want to believe. If I was doing that, I think I'd be sacked if I was doing a job like that. But AO, yeah, it's going to get worse because, as we said, we've got to look at what the aim is. And if we go back to WEF 2030, own nothing, be happy, UBI, universal basic income, step by step by step by step by step. We're seeing that encroachment. We've been seeing that for the last few years. It's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And that budget's going to be a disaster. It's going to be, well, we've got to tax this, we've got to tax that. No one at the BBC has seemingly ever heard of a Laffer curve. Don't ask me why, but apparently that's the case.
What curve?
A Laffer curve. So what a Laffer
Really,
curve
I haven't
is.
heard of it. Perhaps I should work for the BBC.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, okay. A Laffer curve. Basically, I'll do my best on video. So it's like a bell curve. It goes up like that in
Oh,
effect. And what it is it's a correlation between tax receipts and government income. And obviously on that bell curve, there's 2 points that are going to be the same amount of income that's going to be generated. But the tax receipts, one is high, one is low, but they're both going to generate the same amount of income. That's the theory on a Laffer curve. So there's 2 ways to do it. You either increase taxes or you decrease taxes, and in theory, you should end up at some point with that equilibrium with the same amount. I think I've done my best explaining that, but I'd recommend just Wikipediaing it. It's fine. So we seem to be down that route of, well, we must increase taxes, we must do this, and we must do that. Well, okay, well, hang on a minute. Yeah, well, maybe we could do that in areas, but shouldn't we, number one, be looking at reducing spending? First of all, we could come up, there's plenty of things that many governments around the world just, piss away, to be fair, fiat currency wise. But then it comes back to what you said about the end game. If that's the end game, well, who cares how much is going to Ukraine or, I don't know, pharmacies in Eritrea? I don't know. I don't care, to be fair, how much is going out there. So if it comes down to that end game with fiat currency, no one's going to care. No one's going to give a crap. But that budget's going to be bad, and people know it's going to be bad. And again, they should be fostering the entrepreneurship. They should be fostering good business to be done within the UK, all parts of the UK. But they don't. To me, it just seems like they don't want to. That they think, well, hang on a minute, and that's the problem itself.
They don't. It's clear that they don't, right? Because
Exactly.
raising all the costs for small business, which is the largest employer in the UK, well, that's not going to encourage small business. And there's one thing, I think Galloway's Worker Party and Jeremy Corbyn probably argue for this, that you raise taxes, but then you use that money for something that's going to generate wealth for productive enterprises. No, they're using that money to impoverish us and to support Zelensky's lifestyle and to put all these migrants in these hotels, destroying the tourist industry, stoking resentment with the local people who then have to go without because they see these people getting all this treatment. So it's fifth generation warfare. We are being attacked on every single conceivable front. From schooling, children at school, all the way through to the murder of the elderly and the infirm via the assisted murder bill, should that ever become law. On every single vector, they're attacking us. But there is something we can do. So I think one of the things that's going to happen when Rachel from Accounts releases her budget, I think it's going to provoke a really strong backlash. I think it's going to unite a lot of people against this government, and people can be really, really pissed off. Tax revolt has a noble history
Mhm.
Many, many tax revolts, Boston Tea Party, the Glasgow rent strike, no poll tax. I was involved in that one. I was at Trafalgar Square, that massive demonstration that killed off the poll tax, Gandhi's salt tax. And the British said, listen, you have to buy salt, you can't make your own. Sling you up, mate. We're going to walk and make our own salt, right? Um, and I think you know, but
Absolutely.
there is, I want to recommend to people, it's also a way that you can preserve your own wealth and keep your own money. And it's a protest, peaceful, lawful, legal, moral protest against what this government are doing. probityco.com or bit.ly/lawful tax protest, bit.ly/lawful tax protest. And if I may, Robert, just explaining to
Mhm.
your viewers and also mine when this goes out on my channel. So the process you is this: you go to the website, you can download a trust form. Now, trusts are old. They go back to before the Crusades or something like that. They're so embedded in UK's legislation. HMRC, it's the Her Majesty's Revenue Collection Service, is in itself a trust. They're a trust themselves, right? And what a trust is it's a document which says that very easy to fill in and download. I, as the settler of the trust, give a certain amount to my capital gains tax or whatever tax it is, council tax, to the collecting authority. I will give that money to them as the primary beneficiary, provided that they can demonstrate compliance with these statutes, because they're creatures of statute, HMRC, council tax, and they have to follow statute. They have to follow the law. So you can have this money if you're the council, Robert, or HMRC. You can have this money provided you can demonstrate that you're acting legally.
Mhm.
Now, this structure is from the Recognition of Trusts Act 1987, and the laws that I'm asking you to demonstrate that you're abiding by are the International Criminal Court Act and the Terrorism Act. Both of them put together make it a criminal offense to directly or indirectly facilitate or fund any agency or activity that is engaged in or amounts to genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, or acts of terrorism as defined in those statutes. So people could say, well, what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide or not, right? Well, I'm not going to get into that debate. We're just going to use the definition that Parliament agreed on,
Mhm.
which is in those statutes. Then if you can do that by a certain amount of time, well, the money's yours. If you don't do it by a certain amount of time, then the funds go to a secondary beneficiary, which could be anybody else. It could be me again. Now, International Criminal Court Act and Terrorism Act. If you, Robert, are a criminal terrorist organization,
Mhm.
it's a criminal offense for you to ask me for money in the UK. It's a criminal offense for me to give you money if you're a prescribed organization. But also, if you're acting as an intermediary and some of that money is going to be used by another agency for the purposes of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and acts of terrorism, you're breaking the law. And if I give you that money, I'm breaking the law. And there's a provision in those statutes. If I have reasonable cause to believe that some of this money will be used to fund or facilitate genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, or acts of terrorism, I'm breaking the law if I give you this money. And you're breaking the law by asking me for this. The UK's activities in Yemen recently, in Israel, and in Ukraine are violations of those two statutes. Any money that we give to any government agency, directly or indirectly, the 230 odd taxes that we pay, including the TV license, council tax, bus lane violations, parking ticket violations, capital gains tax, income tax, inheritance tax, all goes into this one big pot, the consolidated fund, which was set up sometime, I think, in the 17th century. And then the government then distributes those funds to the different departments. A bit like how me and my wife manage our funds. We put all our money together, and some of it goes off to pay the gas, some of it goes off to buy food, some of it goes off for this, and some of it goes off for that. So some of that money from that pot goes up to facilitate those activities, which are a violation of statute as passed by Parliament. And the Supreme Court ruled that military and quasi-military activities of the UK Armed Forces are violations of the Terrorism Act, even when approved by Parliament.
I just learned a lot of new things there, Rich. Thank you for sharing that. Send the links and I'll put them into for the audience as well, for sure.
Yeah, probityco.com or bit.ly/lawful tax protest. And if you want, Robert, I can ask Chris Coverdale. He is an anti-war campaigner, worked out this system. He spent something like a total of 56 days in prison because he didn't want any of his tax money to be used for the murder of other people. And then he worked out, I can't keep going to prison each time, right? I've got to find some other system. And then through research, he came upon this.
Wow.
So it's definitely worth checking out, because, you know, there may be people watching this who aren't bothered about the Ukraine-Russia war. Perhaps they might even support one side or the other. But you can still use this process in order to keep some money in your pocket, because this government has broken the social contract and is not going to take care of us. We have to take care of ourselves, and we have to take care of each other.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Again, I think that again, I've just learned a lot there myself. So that's all new things to me. But yeah, I think if there's people want to take action on that, I'd be behind that 100%. That sounds like a great idea, to be perfectly honest.
Yes. Yes. Okay, Robert, is there anything else for us to cover or talk about before we finish up?
I was going to shove in the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 when we were going through lists of revolts over the years. That's a very interesting one. That was all to do with taxes as well. That rolls back a few hundred years, of course. One thing I would say, just from another historical perspective, is that if you ever listen or understand anything about the Norman Conquest, for example, check out the Harrying of the North, which was done under William the Conqueror. So if you want a scorched earth policy, that was arguably the most horrific yet effective one I think we've ever seen on these shores. I'll send you links to just for general historical reading. I find that interesting personally. Apart from that, Rich, I think we're good for now. I think there's a lot to talk about next time we're on, and mainly that budget, and see what else is happening around the geopolitical landscape.
Robert, thank you so much. I'll have all your links in the description below, and you'll have all my links in the description below your video. So everybody, please check out Robert, and then please check out Rich. Rich and Robert signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.